How's it going, everybody? Gaurav Bhatt and Mihir Vasavda here. You're listening to the Express Sports Podcast, and it's game time. India's medal count at the ongoing Paralympic Games is into double digits so far, and that is by Wednesday, the day of our recording. Indians have won 10 medals, 2 gold, 5 silver, and 3 bronze. We will get into the stories of 3 of these incredible athletes and how they plotted their way to the medal. We will also talk about what has changed and what needs to change at the systemic level for the disabled athletes. But firstly, Mihir, India's biggest medal haul so far, Rio Mein we won 4. What has stood out about this campaign for you so far?
Gaurav, for me, I think it was just the different sports that India medaled in. For example, I didn't see a medal coming in table tennis, which Bhavina Patel won. It was India's first medal of these games. And for her to win a medal in a sport that's dominated generally by China, Japan, traditionally by these teams, I think that was a pleasant surprise that came. Even the shooting medal was something that I didn't really see coming. So those were 2 pleasant surprises. But one story that stood out, the storyline that stood out for me, which I'm sure we'll be going into it later in the show, is the rise of the Javelin stars. And we've seen it during the Olympics, and we are seeing it even now in the Paralympics of how Indian javelin throwers have completely dominated the field wherever they've competed. And those are some really fascinating stories from India's point of view. Yeah, and there is still a possibility that India might add a medal or 2 because we are recording on a Wednesday and there are still a couple of days left of events. So who knows, this thing could even get better for India.
Absolutely. So far, our medalists are Bhavina Patel, who won a silver in the women's singles table tennis C4 event, Nishad Kumar's silver in the men's high jump T47, Avani Lakara gold in women's 10-meter air rifle shooting standing SH1 category, Devendra Jhajharia with a silver medal in the men's javelin throw F46, Sundar Singh Gurjar, the bronze medal in men's javelin throw F46, Yogesh Kathunia, silver medal in the men's discus throw F56, Sumit Antil, gold medal men's javelin throw F64, Singraj Adhana, bronze medal men's 10-meter air pistol shooting SH1, Mariyappan Thangavelu, silver medal men's high jump T42, and Sharad Kumar, bronze medal men's high jump T42. Let's start with Sumit Mihir because I find it very incredible, that not just the reigning Olympic champion in javelin throw is an Indian, but also the Paralympic reigning champion. And much like Neeraj Chopra, Sumit Antil's gold medal at the ongoing Tokyo Paralympics was more a statement than a simple triumph, because this 23-year-old from Sonipat in Haryana who had lost his left leg below the knee after he was involved in a motorbike accident, he threw the spear to a 68.55 meter, but उसी दौरान he broke his own record 5 times. वो एक के बाद एक अपना record ही better करते जा रहा था, and he kept breaking the world record. And even more fascinating is the fact that Sumit has competed against the Olympic champion Neeraj Chopra. तो इस बारे में थोड़ा हमें बताएं.
For me, Gaurav, I think Sumit is one of the biggest and the best stories for India at these games. For, of course, all the reasons you mentioned. And also it was fascinating how from the very first attempt, his resolve was for all to see. He shattered his old world record, which he'd set in the very first attempt. He did that. And then he went on to repeat the world record breaking feats. But to me, that isn't the only reason why Sumit stands out. You mentioned his story of him being involved in a motorbike accident. And जिसके वजह से उसका lower body got this lower body deficiency. Now, the very nice part about Sumit is that on the domestic circuit, he has been competing in non-disabled events. So I found it very interesting that at the start of this year, he was competing alongside Neeraj Chopra at an Indian Grand Prix. And he wasn't only competing to make up numbers. He finished 7th in the event. And this is like a loaded field where Neeraj himself improved his national mark by 1 centimeter. I think he had some 88.07 meter cut throw, and Sumit in that event threw 66.43, which I thought was pretty incredible. And it has given him a lot of confidence of doing well. So now one of the first things he said after his event was that he will try to qualify for both the Olympics and Paralympics in 2024. And just imagine, Gaurav, what would that do to Paralympics in India? If, say, for example, this would be something similar to what Oscar Pistorius did in 2012. If Sumit Antil does something similar, it will be a massive thing for the Paralympic movement in India. And he sounded very confident, and there is a good reason for that.
Absolutely, yeah. And you mentioned confidence, but self-assessment bhi kafi takda hai because he knows that 70 plus mark that he failed to reach in Tokyo. He has surpassed that before, and he has said he wants to target marks up to 80 and above 80 meters. So that shows his commitment to the sport. And another javelin thrower, I would say one of India's most accomplished Paralympians already, Devendra Jhajharia, he won gold in 2004, then in 2016. And this time he pulled off a new personal best throw of 64.35 meter for the silver in the men's javelin throw F46 event. Now, Jhajharia, who lost his left hand after accidentally touching an electric wire, he bettered his own world record that he had set, but he lost out to Sri Lankan Dinesh Mudiyansilange, which is an incredible story in its own. But this silver, Mihir, at the age of 40, it's no less than a gold for Devendra, right?
Absolutely, Gaurav. And I think Devendra's story is again incredible at so many levels. I mean, first of all, for longevity, to win 3 medals at the Paralympics is an incredible feat, which very few anyway accomplish. Now, in Devendra's case, he won his first medal in 2004, and that was a historic medal in itself because he became only the second Indian to win a Paralympic gold medal after Murlikant Petkar. After that 2004 gold, like he wasn't really in the fray for a very, very long time. 2008, he couldn't go for the podium. Same in 2012. But in 2016, he came back with vengeance. He had a good build-up to the Rio Paralympics, won the gold medal in the Asia-Oceania Championship in Dubai, and at the Paralympics in Rio, he got his second gold medal. And for him to stay motivated at this age, at the age of 40, and to finish with a silver this time, I think that is simply incredible. And it kind of completes his bouquet. He's now won gold, silver at Paralympic Games, at the World Championships. He has a silver at the Asian Para Games. So he has ticked all boxes. I think he definitely is one of India's biggest sporting stars of this century.
The reasons behind Devendra Jhajharia's longevity is that he has been taking the help of scientific advances in training techniques and seeking expertise from some of the best coaches in Europe. Whenever he got a chance, he would venture out to the European countries. He would train in the Olympic centers in Finland. He would keep an eye out for every single technological advance, physical fitness, mental fitness. हर चीज पे पूरा ध्यान रखा, and I guess that's how he was able to sustain his level and his career. Mihir, इन दोनों javelin throwers की हमने बात करी. Of course, we touched upon the Olympic champion Neeraj Chopra as well. What has brought about this, I won't say sudden, but this upheaval of sorts, this uptick where we are getting results in javelin throw, which has not been the case before?
That is something that I think we need to do a proper deep dive, Gaurav. It is a trend. It is something that is glaring now, and it is for real. I mean, if we talk about these Paralympics, then of course we have Sumit, Devendra Jhajharia, and the rest. There is Sundar Gurjar as well, who finished with the bronze medal alongside Devendra. Then you have got the Sri Lankan thrower who won the gold medal as well. If you look at the Tokyo Olympics, in the final you had 2 South Asians in the top 5. You had Neeraj Chopra, of course, who won the gold. But then there was also Nadeem Arshad from Pakistan who finished 5th. So maybe, who knows, South Asians are finally realizing that fast bowling aati hai to shayad javelin throw mein bhi excel kar payenge wo log. But that's perhaps a very simplistic take. But there's something seriously happening in South Asian javelin scene, and yeah, it's worth investigating.
Mihir, you also wrote about the high jumpers, especially Mariyappan Thangavelu from Salem, Tamil Nadu. The run-up to that jump of 1.86 meter, which got him the silver in the T42 category, it had been absolutely terrible because rain made it extremely tough on the day. But Thangavelu's troubles began as soon as he landed in Tokyo. Am I right?
Thangavelu Mariyappan's troubles actually began a lot before the Tokyo Olympics. I mean, it got worse at Tokyo Olympics in some ways, but Gaurav, his story is incredible. He probably would have been on the silver screen right now, and deservedly so, because it's that kind of a story. It hasn't happened yet. So what has happened is he basically won the gold medal in 2016 Paralympics. Now, after that, in 2017, it was announced that a biopic would be made based on his life story. The first poster of that proposed biopic was released by none other than Shah Rukh Khan himself. So there's this huge buzz around it. But just 6 months after that announcement of that movie, Mariyappan's name cropped up in a case where a person from Salem was found dead. According to multiple reports that appeared in various newspapers, Mariyappan was questioned and then he was subsequently cleared. So even as that chapter of his life, at least for the time being, it ended, Mariyappan then had an injury which kind of hampered his preparations in the run-up to the Tokyo Olympics. When he finally got fit and he was ready to compete, the pandemic struck. And for a year, the Olympics got postponed. Everything became extremely uncertain. Eventually, when the time came for him to compete at the Tokyo Paralympics, he landed in the Japanese capital and almost immediately he had to go into isolation. Now, Mariyappan was India's flag bearer at the opening ceremony, but while he was traveling, while he was on the flight to Tokyo, a person on his flight tested positive for COVID-19. Mariyappan was identified as one of the close contacts and he had to be quarantined. So he missed the opening ceremony. He then had to train alone, all by himself, and prepare for his event. And the drama doesn't end there, Gaurav. Like when his event was happening, he was involved in this credible battle with American Sam Grew. Their rivalry goes back to the Rio Paralympics, where Mariyappan edged out Sam Grew and won the gold medal. This time, both were at it again. They cleared 1.83 meters. The bar was then set at the height of 1.88 meters. Mariyappan could not clear it in his 3 attempts, and Grew glided over the bar in his last attempt and took the gold medal. Now, Mariyappan said that since it was pouring heavily while the event was going on, his socks got a bit wet and he wasn't getting the desired grip, which affected the result. Now, this also was something that the bronze medal winner from India, Sharad Kumar, he mentioned that it was extremely difficult for people who had spikes on just one leg to get a grip while it was pouring so heavily. And he requested the technical officials to halt the event while it was raining. But jumpers who had spikes on both legs, they did not back them and the event continued. So Mariyappan's story, I'm sure, has not ended. In fact, if anything, there's just a lot more drama to it now. So if that movie happens, I'm waiting to watch it.
Absolutely, yeah. And we have spoken about these 3 athletes and the techniques, the trends. But looking at the bigger picture, Mihir, cool, we have, 10 medals. Possibly there will be more before the event ends. But aren't there still certain traps that the viewers and perhaps parts of the media also fall into when it comes to discussing the Paralympians and the disabled athletes? And what have been some of the changes on the systemic level that have taken place over the years, but some of the changes which are required for further progress? I know it's a very loaded question, but you take a shot.
It is very loaded, and I don't know if I'm qualified enough to talk about it. I know that I'll be confessing here that I am not perhaps fully used to, or I'm not fully educated on this topic. So I'll fall back on something that an expert wrote about this subject. So Rahul Bajaj, he is a senior resident fellow at the Vidhi Center for Legal Policy. He's also a Rhodes Scholar and has been writing on disability rights. He wrote a very interesting opinion piece, which I read in the Hindu. So he raised a point that while we were celebrating the medal haul, the rich medal haul that India has won at these Paralympics, it is important that we also recognize that in India, persons with disabilities it's tough for them to live a life of maybe equal productivity and dignity as their able-bodied counterparts. Now, this is something we experience in day-to-day lives. Our sensitivities, with regards to facilities for disabled people isn't still there, from be it the cars that we use, the public transport, or even something as basic as going to a mall. So these are the larger issues that perhaps we need to address, and Paralympics perhaps becomes a good way to address and talk about these subjects. So, I mean, you've seen people.
Yeah, perhaps, that is the golden hope here, that this record medal haul at the Paralympic Games ushers a new sort of era for not just disabled athletes, but for general public as well. At this point, I'd like to bring in producer Shashank. Shashank, what do you make of this entire conversation? And not just at the micro level, but even at the macro level, that, like Mihir mentioned, the things that need to change.
So this is a topic that I don't know a whole lot about. I mean, we've emphasized this many times on the show that I'm a casual sports fan. And so Paralympics is something that I've not followed in the past so much. But these Paralympics coming right after the Tokyo Olympics that, we talked so much about. And during that time, I had read a lot of coverage of, Neeraj Chopra, Mirabai Chanu, PV Sindhu, all these people. And while reading their reports, stories about them, I got to know not just about their lives, but also about just how their technique has changed over time, how their skills have improved over different events and years and all that. And I think now when I'm reading about, say, someone like Sumit Antil, I think a lot of reports that I end up reading focus a lot more on his accident and the problems that he faced because of it, rather than the reports focusing on maybe the techniques that he uses. This is the thing that I found with some other athletes as well. And I was wondering, well, is that a bias? And I was just wondering, like, if you've experienced this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I have experienced this, and at some point we would have to admit that we might have even contributed to it. Because, see, when we talk about the Neeraj Chopras and these premier athletes who are breaking through the glass ceilings and all, we also need to ensure कि कई बारी casual public के लिए भी even those stories tend to be, like we've seen in the aftermath of Neeraj Chopra's gold medal, what sort of interviews and what sort of interactions they have been. So it goes both ways. But I think जितना हम लोग बात करेंगे, उतना ही हम लोग टेक्निक पे ज़्यादा ध्यान देंगे. I also think it's a slight disservice if we don't acknowledge it at all. If there was some motorbike accident or some, in case of Devendra Jhajharia, पेड़ पे चढ़ते हुए electricity की वजह से he suffered arm deficiency. It's a slight disservice if we completely omit that sort of life-altering event. But yeah, you are absolutely correct in that the entire story of the athlete doesn't need to be relegated to that one particular moment, jiski wajah se they had to move on to Paralympics. And I think it's a conversation that will only take place the more we talk about these people and their achievements on the track. Because like we mentioned when we were discussing Devendra Jhajharia, his longevity was the factor that we wanted to focus on, and how he takes care of his body and all the physical, mental, and technological advances that he has made, that at the age of 40, he's still competing. So I think because we are so familiar with Devendra Jhajharia's story, I think वो थोड़ा सा मिस्टीक भी खत्म हो जाता है कि किस लिए क्या डिसेबिलिटी थी. बट उसके अलावा then we start focusing on the sport and the person itself. So I think the more we talk about it, अगर हम ऐसा ही रहेगा कि यार 4 साल में पैरालंपिक्स हो गए तो मेडल आ गया तो चलो अच्छा क्या हुआ, आपका ट्रैक्टर में एक्सीडेंट हुआ या जो भी, then it's that trap that we'll again fall into. But if we keep talking about these athletes and if we track their careers and we follow them closely and what sort of equipment that they are dealing with and what is the latest problem that they are facing on the track, I think that should help evolve the conversation. I hope I made sense there.
Yeah, you definitely did. And I completely agree with you. Like, you can't have a story where you don't mention, let's say, in Sumit's case, his accident. But yeah, definitely we need to focus more on the other narrative of, the struggles of an athlete like you would any other.
Yeah, which brings us back to the point that hopefully this Paralympic medal haul, which is only going to swell because the badminton players will be taking the court soon, it will help push the narrative and the conversation in that direction, where we will be keeping track of all these athletes and medalists and will follow their achievements in future as well. On that hopeful note, let's wrap up this episode of Game Time. Listeners, stay tuned to the Express Sports podcast, but more importantly, stay safe. Adios.
You were listening to Express Sports by the Indian Express. This week's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.